today we're gonna discuss a really interesting topic: empowering and growing teams as you scales, especially in these times that many of us are still remote and working remotely or in a hybrid model. How do you do that in a good way? And today with me, I have brilliant minds that gonna give some their insights, how they had tackled different challenges during this time and how to grow and empower your teams in the sustainable way. And we will kick it off right away. And Pamela, you are the VP of design at SumUp. Can you tell us a little bit how you working with to build your teams and scale your organization, especially now when you are both in remote and setting and also in the office?
Great, Matti. Thank you very much for the questions. Great to be here. So scaling teams at this time has been quite challenging. As you can probably imagine, we've been doing a lot of our recruiting, of course, remotely. Frequently haven't even seen people until a recent offsite where we've been able to bring some people back into the office and get together and really bond. So there's been a lot of challenges, especially since we've been doubling in size. And I very much believe that in order to be able to grow a community and a culture, you need to have a bit of that time together and a bit more organically to be able to transmit it. So we've been spending a lot of time on looking at how do we actually do this virtually. There's a couple of topics that related to this. Of course, one is the recruiting and the onboarding. So how do we really bring people on board and get them to understand how SumUp works? What are our practices? We've been doing some buddy system, so we can have some people match up, especially to get to know the organization because we are quite complex. Then we're also spending quite a bit of time on onboarding. We've put an extensive presentation together that we'll actually share even beyond design, so people can really understand a bit the history, what's important, the complexity of the products, what are the design system, what are our meetings and who to reach out to. And then now that we have a little bit more flexibility in coming back, we are encouraging people to come and spend some time in the office so we can get a little bit more of that organic social dimension reintroduced, if you will. And I can really see that really introduces a lot of that richness that we've been really missing. I think as working remotely and bringing people on board remotely, we have to just pay a lot more attention to the individual, which I think is one of the things that's really important for us to understand. Are they struggling? Do they have some needs? Do they know who to reach out to? And we keep bringing people back in the fold. So we're trying a lot of different things. I think some work better than others. And we just have to continue to adapt, especially since we're a very distributed company and not everybody has a chance to come back to the office.
Thank you, Pamela. And Yolanda, you're working as the Director for Platform Ecosystems Design at Kaluza. And you mentioned that earlier to me that you have people that really don't want to come back to the office. And can you explain a little bit how you're working to create this emotional connection between team members? Because from my point of view, it's really important to have that personal connection when you're building and growing teams.
Hi. Yes, we are trying really hard in the last few weeks to just start getting people more and more used to like physical connections. But for the past months, we have created, team events online just to get people to connect. I have a team that started about 16 months ago with 6 people. We are almost 36 now, and they barely know each other. So it's been a really challenging time to start a team anew and hire people, and creating all of these kind of virtual events, workshops, lectures, masterclasses, and just budding each other in smaller groups or pods with types of small pieces of work or interests is really helping the team to bond and join each other. But our work the last few weeks or all of our work is put into actually trying to get them back into workshopping together. Nothing beats the smell of a good Sharpie and a new packet of Post-its. So is, trying to lure everybody with interesting problems to solve or interesting workshops, starting to visit all the offices we have in different parts of the UK and bringing them together, just, just to get used to it. I think we have all lost the habit of being with each other. So that is a bit difficult to actually bring back if you don't have a very good reason for it. So giving them good reasons for it is the important part.
Yeah, I agree with that. And say, you're working at Trustclass, the VP of UX, and I know that you're working a lot with try to both align people around what is the company objectives and also gives them some space to be empowered. Can you explain a little bit how you're working with that?
Hold on, I was muted. First, thank you for having me here. I'm thrilled to be here with you all. So Trustly, probably not many people know. Probably none of you had Trustly before. And we are a growing company. We started a small startup company. We are growing rapidly. With that, we bring in a lot of people, not only in the UX team, but every part of the company. So going from a growth-oriented startup to more mature growth company, there's a need to establish a common goal and align activities with business objectives. And as a startup, you want to do everything. You want to do everything that can serve the company. And whoever asks you to do something to make things better, you do that. So you get into this mindset where with can-do attitude, you want to do everything to serve the company and users and all that. As we grow, it's more difficult to say no than to say yes. There's a tendency to say yes to everything. So to help team members really delineate what's important, what's meaningful, what are impactful versus things that you could do, but maybe you shouldn't, right? So the company deployed OKR. This really helped us focus on things around key results instead of key activities, right? Instead of driving, running around looking for things to do or just serving requests that are coming through. Aligning on key results and aligning really through the organization up and down from the business objectives to day-to-day activities. It really helps people understand where they are contributing and have a clarity and also transparency around where they fit in the company. So it really provides clarity that's quite helpful for rapidly growing organization, which tend to lose sight of a bigger picture.
Thank you, Seya. And Pamela and Yolanda, how do you work with this type of, have this balance between autonomous and alignment in your organizations? Who wants to start?
We also use OKRs as a way of actually getting everybody to focus on the same problems. Then after the company OKRs for the half or for the quarter have been decided, it's up to the teams to come up with the initiatives that they are going to be working on to actually achieve those objectives. And we leave quite a lot of autonomy to the teams to decide what are these activities going to be and how many resources they are going to use to tackle them. Of course, there is a lot of jiggling in between, and we are right now in that fantastic week, in the first week of the quarter, where a lot of this rejiggling is happening, and you just need to lay down the teams and start moving the resources around to whatever activities seem to be the most valuable. But in general, there is a relative or quite a lot of level of autonomy between the teams once OKRs get set.
So we also use OKRs, but we have actually a bit of an interesting history that when we formed Tribes several years ago, it was actually just before I started, the company really emphasized almost to an extreme autonomy of Tribes and these larger teams, to the point where everybody was really focused on their part of the ecosystem, their part of the experience, and very little actually alignment across the organization, which historically has actually been okay. But as we are starting to develop products that need to be much more integrated into a cohesive experience, but I always say the interface doesn't lie. The interface starts to show where the seams are unless we have a level of alignment. So I've been very much focused on articulating alignment across the company, across these teams, especially at the design and UX layer, because if we can at least create a level of cohesiveness and alignment in that interface, then we have a bit of a chance to really create something that's cohesive. To that point, we actually have a design system that we're really working on, and we've just articulated a shared vision of where we want to go as an end-to-end experience. The reality, though, is it's not only a design or interface level. It really depends a lot on the technology and on the backends and the shared data sets. And so we've been moving towards a more integrated narrative as a company so we can start to connect the dots. I think it's a journey. I'd say we're getting a lot better and a lot stronger, but it's a really interesting sort of tension between this empowerment and velocity that we're really looking for, and yet also figuring out how do you still, with velocity, do this kind of alignment so that at the end of the day, the journey experience is really delivered on. And it's a challenging state to be in, but we're making progress.
Yeah.
Sorry, I agree with Pamela. It's impossible to have this alignment without all of those tools and frameworks. The design systems, UI tooling, service mapping. We have been growing our team a lot with those kind of a cross-section practices where we have our content design practice and service design practice, and the visual design tools are like equal to every team, and we use them as conduit to make sure that we keep that consistency. Without it, the velocity wouldn't be, or we will be just designing completely different experiences. But yeah, beyond that, there is autonomy. But without it, it wouldn't be possible. It would just be a complete disaster.
Yeah, thank you. And going back a little bit to you, Yolanda, you talked about when you set an OKRs and things like that, it's up to the teams to rally around that and form themselves around those different objectives. Do you see that, because I also hear a lot of that, you should have stable teams and the team shouldn't be autonomous and not, you shouldn't split them up too often so they can be a high functional team that can take on whatever problem they're facing. So do you have, this is also more an open question to all of you, do you have any mechanisms when and how you split up your teams, or if you add on people to the teams, or to make sure they have what they need to deliver on the objectives or the problem they're going to solve?
I think it's a fantastic theory when it comes to mature companies to have like really steady teams that work in a problem for a long time and they bond together and they are relatively known structures. But in my case at the moment, I've been working in several relatively young companies, and that is an impossibility. Your products change, your objectives relatively change, and teams can never get steady enough to say, oh, we're never going to move these structures or combine them together or split them or even move resources from one team to another, because you never have of certain things enough, service designers, for example, or writers, and you have to actually share them in between several teams or have a centralized organization and just deploy them to the teams that need them at a particular moment. I mean, it will be ideal. In an ideal utopic scenario, that's the fantastic way to work, obviously. But I don't think, or at least I haven't worked yet, although I have worked in big organizations, they were all in a level of digital transition or platformization, that it was not yet as mature as to say, these are the teams and this is how the teams are going to be. And they have a little bit of everything and they can completely work on their own as self-standing units. So far, there is a lot of change. And I think teaching or coaching resilience within the teams, and make them understand that these changes are likely to happen. I think is part of keeping teams happy and focus, because it's impossible to keep that standardization and that level of, at least in my experience.
Maybe to add to that a little bit, this is in a lot of ways the way I've grown the design community. It's sum up, and it's also a little bit of my fundamental philosophy. In order to scale, we'll never have enough designers. We'll never have, actually it would be impossible for us to scale immediately UX writers in every single team. We'd be exploding as an organization. So I think it's a balance of having enough resources to be dedicated, and then having some resources also available to provide some level of flexibility, in the organization. Again, never having enough. There's always somebody who's a bit stretched, but I do think that's the only way you can really grow an organization. Otherwise, you create a tremendous amount of overhead and cost that doesn't necessarily reflect the kind of impact we can be driving. I also don't believe that allows us to build community, which we talked about a little bit earlier, and that's super important for us to be able to be efficient, empowered, aligned, and also impactful.
In my experience, that flow to work kind of organization where you have a resource pool where capabilities are developed and managed, and then assigning these pool of resources to initiatives based on priorities worked better with individuals having autonomy in driving some initiatives. And OKR and processes and design systems and all that, they all are mean to an end. So we often forget that these tools are deployed for some purposes. OKR drives transparency, drives alignment across organizations. But if you focus too much on key results and just make a checkbox activity, you start to lose the transparency that you wanted to have, alignment you wanted to have. So use tools and processes as ways to drive the purpose. And so with that, really having a clear shared vision that's really not coming top down, but involve team members to create, and also align their passions with what we do and focus areas. That tend to help deal with dynamic times, changes coming all the time, objectives change, priority change, and some initiatives get killed. And things that they spend days and nights working on may get canceled at any given moment. It's difficult for team members to face that change all the time unless there's a bigger picture they can really rally around. So not sure if I'm answering a question directly, but the growing pain really is all about helping team cope with changes. It's positive mindset. So that's why put a lot of focus on.
Yeah, thank you, Say. And on that note that you talked about the passion of people, and you need to let people work what they're passionate about. Also an open question: how do you work with the individual development, especially in this setup when we are remote and such? You don't really see how people doing in the daily basis and such. So how can you support and help your teams or individuals in those teams?
When we recruit for the potentials, also mindset, like learning mindset, growth mindset, and then to really understand where they want to be, let's say 5 years, 10 years from now, not necessarily in industry, but their career, their bigger pictures and all that. And as we grow together at work, I really emphasize understanding individual needs, their needs to grow in certain areas. If somebody wants to be a cook 5 years down the road, well, how can we align some of the works we do in fintech, right, to help him or her develop in areas that the job doesn't feel like 9 to 5 constraints to achieve their goals, but 9 to 5 feels like, well, it's leading somewhere to where they want to be. And so understanding individuals and then really understanding what's driving them individually, but what triggers their really waking up in the morning and feeling good about coming to work, right? The motivation, what floats their boats, if you will, to understand that at an individual level. And when they have to do some work that don't quite align with their visions and passions, explain, why that's needed and how this can help others and teams. So, that could help individuals too. But the other one is a team orientation. If you have team members that feel like, they're not in it for themselves, but they are there for bigger pictures, be it the customers and consumers we serve, or the teams that they support, right? And this team mindset and orientation also help them align with their passion, with the things that is important for company, consumers, and what have you. So.
Maybe just to add, we've been spending a lot of time with people one-on-one. Unfortunately, everything being reduced to Zoom meetings because I don't have the ability to, observe people or catch people sort of in the moment. But when I sort of notice that they're tired or maybe they have a need or they just make a comment to me, so we're spending quite a bit of time in this kind of one-on-one relationship with them to make sure we understand what their needs are, not only where their projects are, but where they're themselves struggling. And we spend time on the more personal side of conversations, not only focusing on work. We've also recently rolled out a new career development framework, and I think it's actually quite a robust one, though a bit different from what I've had in the past. And we're using it I'm using it to really do much more in-depth feedback cycles. We've really written lots of different sort of criteria in terms of what we expect at different parts of the career development. And I'm finding with every feedback conversation I'm doing now, I'm spending up to an hour and a half with the individuals, and really it's helping us drive to just a level of detail and care in the conversation that is richer than what I've had in the past. And I find that's also a really valuable and helpful way in which to spend time, especially right now, and especially because moments are dynamic and we don't have that kind of informal ability to connect. So this is something that is currently working really quite well for us. It is intensive, so it's not necessarily something that scales forever. But I think, especially since we're still not out of COVID completely, it's a really important investment.
Pamela, do you guys use like a Slack or real-time communication? Because what I found out was that Slack, it's almost like walking around the office, casually talking to people kind of tool that you don't want to wait a few hours, a few days to respond like emails,
Yeah, Slack is actually more dominant for us than email. I've gotten to the point where I barely even check email, or try to at least look at anything on fire once a day. But it's still not quite the same thing. Yes, I have informal conversation with some very specific people, but I've also had people tell me that they are afraid of reaching out because they know I'm busy and my calendar is ridiculous. So I've actually recently just set up office hours so people don't hesitate, to say, hey, I need to talk to you. And I've encouraged people to always send me a Slack message. And if somebody says, hey, I really need to talk to you, I immediately, free up my calendar to do so. But it's still not the same thing, because I'm really working in a much more contained environment. And yes, it is pay attention to the design community. We should send out kudos, etc. But there are also other people not in my immediate community that are also really quite important. As a leader in the company, I need to be available, and I want to be available to them as well. And that's a bit more the water cooler coffee pot conversation than it is necessarily Slack message, unless I think about them at that moment in time. So it's not the same thing for me.
Yeah, we do the same. We use Slack a lot. Probably of the three of you, probably the most. I literally forget to check my emails. Almost nothing really important comes to my emails anymore. It's always, we use it to exchange documents, to track projects, to do everything. We use Slack, and we have created communities for anything, you know, from people that likes chocolate to people that has pets, just to kind of try to recreate in Slack some of those water cooler conversations that you will have normally with your peers and your group about, you know, I have a new puppy, or I just pick up a new hobby, or, you know, who has some extra yarn because I want to do this new art project or whatever it is. And it's a great tool for that. Also for education, you know, what we were saying about career paths and growth and education, encouraging bonding in between people and creating pairs to learn new skills. So when we have somebody that comes from a very strict UX background, we try to pair them to either a content designer or a service designer or, you know, any other practice to start creating that type of education that you will get if you actually sat down next to somebody in the office that had a different practice to yours. And you curiously ask, you know, what are those service maps about, or, you know, what you're designing over there, or what tool are you using to do, you know, wireframes or whatever it is. I mean, we're still far away from being the same as being in the office, but we try, and so far Slack has been the best tool, and Miro, Slack and Miro have been the best tools we have found to actually create those kind of common spaces and collaboration and learning environments. And we have done some pretty fun and pretty cool stuff with Miro, where we create like an island or a city, and we have areas where we can share anything from pictures of our working spaces or the sleepers and other kind of important information around an area, and people can visit these different bits of Miro digitally and try to have a conversation. But you know, some are working better than others, I guess.
Thank you, guys. One question on this topic. There's something that we have a challenge with at Viaplay, is that we have like a little bit of an information overflow or overload and communication, because we have lots of the different tools. We're using Teams, we're using Slack, we're using emails. So sometimes it's really hard, especially when you're onboarding new people, to know where should I go to find the certain information, because information is there, but it's sometimes all over the place. So do you have any strategy for that? How you store certain information, or how you're using those kind of tools?
I mean, I'm literally coming out of a project, or two projects in this case, for internal and external documentation. As I said, the company Kaluza is a really young company. So our documentation information has been growing organically for the last 18 months. And yeah, you feel like Indiana Jones, just trying to find a piece of information, just digging around folders and files and pieces of Confluence. I mean, we have Confluence, but it was never probably information architected. So people was just dropping areas and creating pages, and they're all over the place. So we just came out of, this morning I was reviewing it, just creating a new information architecture for Confluence, just to get all that information into like meaningful sections with meaningful names and so on, and just organizing it a little bit. Confluence is a great tool, but obviously if you don't, if you don't give it love and attention and a structure, then it ends up being like everything else, just really unorganized. Creating a system of tags and some sort of taxonomy also helps, a common language, because people might not use the same words to categorize the same thing. So having a common glossary or a taxonomy helps a lot. And we have done the same with our external site. So that's why I say it's two projects, because we're doing it for our internal information and also for our external one, because we've been creating pages for external use. As the teams, while we're talking about autonomy versus alignment, right, is when it comes a moment when there needs to be put some type of fencing or something, some guidelines to actually help people with efficiencies and toil. Otherwise, ends up being a lot of chaos.
Yeah, we are in a on the same boat almost. Slack actually had a negative impact too with information overflow, and we observed some initiatives being getting done outside of the system on Slack channel where some people are involved, and we have Confluence too, and tickets keep flowing in without a clear process or governance around it. With most of the tickets saying urgent, due yesterday, kind of things, right? And we got to the point where we just couldn't deal with all those, not just information overflow, but tasks just flowing from everywhere. So we're trying to put in process in place, and even improved process, a better way of working, is a behavior change, right? So you have to change behavior. So to do that, you can't just deploy new system, new process, and publish it and send email to tell people, look at it. People don't follow that. They just go through what they're used to, what's easiest, right? So when we deploy changes, when we want to do things consciously to change behaviors, like even OKR, we do pilot, few pilot projects, and then show the success. And then whenever we deploy, it's actually doing things with in new ways, new processes, and using actually new tools, or be it Confluence pages, so that it's not just something goes out there, adding to the more information that's you already flooded with, right? And so practicing new ways, practicing using new tools, and piloting to demonstrate success that the team can do it, and team's already doing it. I think that's a good way of shaping path forward to change how we work, and also put some clarity around that, how things should be communicated, where to get to information, and all that.
Maybe just a couple more things to add. I think we all struggle with Confluence at some point or another. I think I mentioned it a bit earlier, when we bring new people on board, we do have a once a month onboarding, in-depth onboarding session where we walk people through really important information to know, and also channels and communications and emails and everything else. Then the additional more personalized onboarding that we do is we have over time created a bit of a cheat sheet for people, where we really create the links to the various Confluence pages that are impossible to find, and just really give them pointers to who to reach out to for what, also who to just meet in the organization to be able to build some of these relationships that are going to become really important. And we keep adapting that, but I think that's also, it just is a way in which to fast pace a little bit people through, the first couple of weeks when they're trying to really adapt to a new organization and want to understand how to do things. And that's one of the ways in which we found it really quite useful. SumUp as a company has actually a several-day onboarding that everybody goes through, and we're looking at enhancing that a little bit. So it's multiple kind of facets to try to get people, oriented and situated in what's the pattern of communications, or, where are the places and the practices that people should be aware of.
Yeah, I really like that, Pamela. And that's something that we also have at Nent and Viaplay. We have, but it's not a full week. It's 2 days and intro days where you meet lots of different people and presentation from C-level and such. So just have a better understanding how things working in this company, how you can navigate it. But I really like that too. If you have this, as you said, like a week, a boot camp, so you really go in depth in the different kind of things in the company. So we just have a few minutes left. So, and that was a really nice conversation with you guys. But do you have any final words to the audience if they're considering to growing and scaling, and how they can do that in a sustainable way, especially now when we will be in this setting of having this hybrid working model, both remotely and in office? Pamela, let's start with you.
Closing words. I think knowing when to slow down in scaling and to pause. I think we grew quite a bit in up to the spring, and then just needing to pause almost a little bit to see, do we have all the practices in place, get that settled, focus on the teams, focusing on the vision, focusing on our alignment before we start scaling again. So I think being really empathetic to that, and then paying attention to the individuals, and doing all of that, of course, in light of the organization and the organizational needs and the organizational language, I think is really, really critical.
Yes, thank you so much. And Yolanda?
Yeah, same with Pamela. And understanding when you need to stop. There is something of a kind of onboarding tiredness, especially when you go from a very small team to a very big team, there's only a few people that can take on board onboarding new members, and it gets exhausting at some point, interviewing and onboarding and adding new people to the team. So pausing and giving a breathe before you start again. Make sure that in that period you review your onboarding materials, your interviewing procedures, and so on, to make sure that you're doing it right. Do a bit of a retro, kind of fix everything and continue. And when it comes to it, what you want is everybody that joins the team to have a great experience. And if you are rushed and you are kind of trying to get everybody at the same time, and you haven't put time and effort of the processes and the frameworks to do so, it ends up being a really bad experience for everyone. So I think that's what we all want. We all want, that the effort we put in hiring amazingly talented people ends up being a great experience for everyone, for the team that you already have and the people that is joining it. So there is nothing worse than starting in a new company and having, 3 weeks of trying to find where your computer is or where the folders are, or no meetings of people to talk to you, or not having a very structured onboarding. So put your house in place before you grow. That will be my closing words.
And Seya?
I'd like to reflect both Pamela and Yolanda's point that it's all about people. And we need to put more effort, personal effort, in getting to know people, but also slowing down. That's a time to reflect and to hear back from the team. So we tend to put in effort without getting feedback. So our effort may be misplaced. So really slowing down, reflecting, and involving new employees and team members in really getting to the good place. Reflecting, I think that's very important, especially in this point.
Thank you for that final words. And to just recap it, it's about to start stopping, basically. And also, as we're doing in product development, reflection, it's super important to have that also when we develop our organization. So Pamela, Yolanda, Seya, thank you so much to participate in this panel. It was a pleasure. And thank you.